Hi everybody, I'm the author of Chronically Silly, Kimberly, aka Kim Possible, and I decided to change things up a little bit and do a video blog entry today on the topic of prednisone and its long-term use in patients that are chronically ill, specifically with autoimmune diseases, as prednisone is an immunosuppressant as well as a steroidal anti-inflammatory. I'd like to start with a little bit of a background that I'm pulling from publicmedicalhealthrecords.gov. You can look them up. It is a reputable source. It's usually where I go for my medication and drug information, as you should always try and get them from primary sources such as that and reliable resources. So prednisone is, and I quote from their site, a synthetic corticosteroid drug that is particularly effective as an immunosuppressant drug. It is used to treat certain inflammatory diseases and at higher doses some types of cancer, but has significant adverse effects. Because it suppresses the immune system, it leaves patients more susceptible to infections. It is usually taken orally but can be delivered by intramuscular injection or intravenous injection. It has a mainly glucocorticoid effect. Prednisone is a prodrug that is converted by the liver into prednisone, which is the active drug and also a steroid. It is in a medication class called corticosteroids, as we just learned, and it works to treat patients with low level of corticosteroids by replacing the steroids that are normally produced naturally in the body's adrenal glands. It works to treat other conditions by reducing the swelling and redness and by changing the way the immune system works. This is exactly why it's used in patients like myself that are SLE lupus patients, as well as many other diseases in the same category of autoimmune drugs, such as rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, etc. I'm sure you all are aware of the numerous autoimmune diseases that are out there, as most of us have more than one or two or three in some cases. And I am actually just getting back from the doctor after having some low cortisol readings come back while I'm still on prednisone. I was currently on 7.5 milligrams, which was my lowest in probably about 6 months, but upon dropping from 10 to 7.5 during my taper, I started feeling increasingly worse. Lack of energy, extreme fatigue, weakness, loss of appetite, which, as you all know, is very uncommon on prednisone, but seems to be common in my body. So after seeing the rheumatologist today and bursting my prednisone last Friday back to 25, feeling a good improvement, minus the neuropathy and the nerve pain, but as far as all the other pain that was going on and the weakness and fatigue, it seemed that the increase in prednisone really made a difference. So, as you all know, that's why it's the drug we love to hate. Unfortunately, it seems that being on it long term, since January of 2010 when I was started on it for a very low platelet count, I've been unable to get off it, and unfortunately I'm suffering some of those long-term side effects, as it is not supposed to be used as a long-term therapy, but in a lot of patients with autoimmune diseases and chronic illnesses, it very frequently is. I would also like to read to you just a little, almost like a disclaimer or warning about prednisone, as I know many of you already know, but I'm sure some don't, and it is very important because I had taken my steroids and still had a low cortisol blood work, indicating that I was most likely going through prednisone withdrawal because my adrenal gland was not working at all or much at all and was not producing cortisol itself, because what happens when you're on prednisone is the adrenal gland is suppressed, and after about 7 days to about 2 weeks it can almost completely stop working, and that's why you need to be weaned and tapered down on prednisone. And usually at the higher doses you can taper a bit more quickly, but as you're coming down, and especially under 20, they usually like to go extremely slow, and once you get to 10 it's a very, very slow taper, usually by 2.5 milligrams or an alternating dose. For example, taking 10 milligrams one day, 7.5 the next, and alternating like that. The lowest I have ever gotten down to was 2.5 milligrams, which is almost nothing, but I felt miserable on it, and shortly after was bursted up to 50 milligrams. That was this past summer when I was having some dysautonomia issues and symptoms that were going on. And I would just like to read to you some of the side effects that can happen when you're on these long-term prednisone doses, as it is very controversial for long-term use. But unfortunately, as many of you know, it's one of the few drugs that works, and it is only the second drug that is FDA approved in lupus patients, as many of our drugs are used off-label. And it was the only one up until this past March of 2011, when I'm sure most of you know, Benlysta was approved by the FDA. But up until that, prednisone, which was released in 1955 for the first time, was FDA approved for lupus patients as the first lupus FDA approved drug. So here are some of the side effects that you can have from steroids, and I'm going to start with the ones that seem to be more prevalent in most prednisone takers. So we have weight gain and an increased appetite, which I know most of us have. Increased blood sugar, difficulty controlling emotion and train of thought, facial swelling or puffy cheeks you'll notice in a lot of people. Now, I do not get this. I've been on 60 milligrams for 2 months when my platelets were low. I was on 100 milligrams of Solumedrol via IV when I was admitted into the hospital back in January of this past year. I do not get the puffy cheeks, and I'm thankful for that, but I do get a lot of the not so nice side effects, especially the longer term ones, since I've been on it for about 1.5 years now. Depression and psychosis are not uncommon. Unusual fatigue or weakness, mental confusion and indecisiveness, blurred vision, abdominal pain, ulcers, and a lot of stomach and digestive issues. I take 20 milligrams of omeprazole daily with my prednisone and do find that it does help a bit, although I still have a lot of indigestion with it. You're at a very high risk of infection depending on the dose of prednisone. You can have steroid-induced osteoporosis. For some people, this doesn't take very long to have an onset, especially in older patients. I myself am only 23, and I have had a bone density scan every 6 months since I've been on it, and knock on wood, have phenomenal bone density still. So, got that going for me. Long-term migraines or headaches are not uncommon on the higher doses. Insomnia, which most lupus patients have anyway, whether it's due to pain or whatever goes on in our bodies, since they are so different from everyone else's. I know when my prednisone doses are increased, I have a harder time sleeping. I'm also a coffee addict, which doesn't help the situation, but see, I've got one right next to me right now, a little Dunkin' Donuts. So between that and my higher doses of prednisone, I'm ready to go. Some of the other side effects are cataracts and glaucoma, anxiety, stomach pain or bloating, severe swelling, mouth sores or dry mouth. You can also get something called thrush in the back of your throat when you're on the higher doses. This is a fungus that grows back there almost like a yeast in overproduction. Some of the symptoms to watch out for, I get this a lot on the higher doses, especially above 40 milligrams, is white stuff in the back of your throat, tonsils and tongue, a sore, scratchy throat, very big loss of appetite, which is unusual for most patients that take prednisone. So just something to watch out for. Some of the not so serious but still side effects that people have from prednisone can be nervousness or shaky hands. I know I get very jittery and shaky on it. Rashes, increased appetite, hyperactivity, which I call my prednisone ADHD, especially when I'm bursted from a lower dose to a dose of around 25, 30, 40, 50. I will sit down and get 8 pages of a research paper done for grad school while I'm cleaning my room, putting my clothes away, and making post-it notes everywhere to remind me of other things I'd like to get done during the day. So, prednisone ADHD. Frequent urination, leg pains and cramps, sensitive teeth, and I'd like to discuss some of the more long-term serious side effects, as most of us are not on it just on small bursts or for short periods of time, like on a Medrol pack or whatnot. If you are, you're very lucky. I've been trying to get off it since a year ago, actually, March of 2010, and it just doesn't seem like something that's happening in the future or anytime in the near future right now, but I've learned to suck it up because I feel much better with it than I do even at the lower doses. But some of the long-term side effects include Cushing's syndrome, truncal weight gain, which is your midsection. Even I've noticed, now I'm not big, I haven't put on much weight at all. I've actually lost weight because of my Cellcept, but I do find that more of my fat is stored around my hips and midsection, and it disperses itself in different areas. Diabetes is also a big one, and depression as well. And then some of the other long-term side effects, one that's extremely an extreme long-term side effect, if you're asking me, is the dependency. Your body becomes dependent, as we were discussing earlier, because the adrenal gland is suppressed. And this can happen as early as 7 days after people have been on a continuous dose of steroids. What happens is your body temporarily loses the ability to synthesize the natural steroids, cortisol being the main one, which is what my blood work came low for. And this results in a dependence on prednisone. Some people are not able to get off prednisone at all, whether it's because of a mixture of symptoms, of flares of their disease, and the fact that their adrenal gland is insufficient and it never fully regains its ability to produce it when they've been on it for such a long time. One of my biggest fears right now, so hoping that we're going to be able to get it kicking up back in motion a little bit once we're coming down and tapering again. And again, this is something you need to watch out for, because I noticed that when I dropped from 10 to 7.5, I started to feel a lot worse, and this was about 3 weeks ago. Some of the symptoms I was having were fatigue that was just beyond my daily fatigue that I deal with, extreme weakness to the point where I could barely get up and out of bed some days or move my body. Complete loss of appetite, and I do love to eat, so that's not something that's fun when you're not even craving anything to eat. I would have a lot of lightheadedness and dizziness upon standing, a ton of pain throughout my body, the sharp shooting pains in the legs, the hips, an upset stomach. I was having a high intolerance to cold. Now I also suffer from Raynaud's, but at the same time, I was freezing. You see how I'm bundled. I'm in my house right now, but freezing to the point where like nothing would warm me up, but then I would have excessive sweating. So these are some of the side effects you have to look out for prednisone withdrawal. And just because you're still on the medication, you can still go through withdrawal, as your body can become dependent on a certain amount, and under a certain dose, if your body is not producing it naturally through the adrenal gland, your body is going to be going through the withdrawal symptoms, which was something I had no idea. I didn't know that if I was still taking a drug and not missing my doses, that it was possible to have dependency or withdrawal effects. But luckily my cardiologist drew for it upon explaining my new symptoms to him, and it came back low, so we dealt with it. And hopefully we're getting on the right course again. And again, I wanted to talk about this because I feel like prednisone is a highly controversial topic in the autoimmune and chronic illness world, specifically lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, etc., because many of us hate the drug for the laundry list of side effects I just read to you. And unfortunately, it seems to be one of the few things that are working or have worked and seem to work when we're in pain and when our bodies are showing a higher C-reactive protein or ESR rate, or our markers are up, or we're feeling a lot of those symptoms that we start to recognize when a flare is coming on. And I do think that the FDA's approval of Benlysta this past March is a good stepping stone. It's a new class of medications called B-list inhibitors, I believe. And while it's not going to work in everyone, just like any other lupus drug that we use, it is specifically designed for patients with lupus, and it's a great stepping stone, and I think it offers us a lot of hope in the future for what's to come in lupus research, and I think it's a great stride, and I'm happy to see something like this happen in my lifetime, especially being a young lupus patient. And I'd love actually for some comments to be left on what your opinions on prednisone are, how long you've been on it, if you've used it long term. I know some people have, completely opposed the idea and are trying to work without it, and unfortunately sometimes it's not really an option, but you should always definitely talk to your doctor or your rheumatologist about your side effects, symptoms, and your concerns about prednisone, which is something I expressed today at my appointment with everything that's going on and the new insufficient cortisol levels that my body was showing. So I hope this video was very helpful, and I'd love to have some feedback. Have a great day. Thank you.